My name is Morgan, and I'm with the Berkeley Pulse, which is the newest student media outlet on campus. And our goal is to cover campus culture and energy and highlight the voices that we don't believe have the access to be highlighted. So today I'm speaking with Melanie Abrams, who is a writer, an author, and also a professor at UC Berkeley.
Hi.
How's your winter break been so far?
Good, relaxing actually, which is nice after the semester. No big plans. So good,
Mhm.
just gotta chill.
What kind of responsibilities do you have as a professor during winter break?
Yeah, very little.
Okay, nice.
Which is nice. Um, we go a little bit into the quote unquote not break because of grading, but not very far. And then now I've started working on all my syllabi for next semester. So, but I still get like at least probably almost, 3 to 4 weeks like to not do any schoolwork, which is super nice.
It's really good. And you have a family, so I'm assuming you spent a lot of time with your family. Like, tell me
Yeah.
about like the coolest things you did over break.
Yeah. Well, oh God, that's like a such on the spot question. Well, two things I think. One is that so I have a kid going to college next year, and
Congrats.
I know, thanks. I think well, so we were on the tail end of making sure all of that got in, which is like its own crazy stress, as you know. Even if the parent doesn't want to stress about it and doesn't really, isn't invested in like the outcome, the kid is so stressed. So it's, kind of well, there's that fallout too. Um,
Mhm.
and then we did like little kind of side jaunts. Like we went to Petaluma. I don't know if you've ever been there. I highly recommend it for all you Cal students. It has amazing thrift shops, like totally affordable, like really cute, like record stores, and a really great restaurant called Acme, which is like this burger place that you sit outside, but it's so good. So we did that. I'm trying to think like what else. Like everyone here is super into like the Christmas holidays. So we did, all the like gingerbread house making and tree decorating and all that. So those were some of the things.
That's really nice. I'm glad you got to get your mind away from
Yeah,
school. I know a lot of students are in LA, so I'm wondering what the heck they do because
right.
everyone I live with in Anchor House gone all or all winter break. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
What does it feel like for you? I believe you live in Berkeley, correct?
Oakland, but
Okay. Do you tend to visit campus at all during winter break and just see how empty it is?
no. In fact, I'm like a little bit scared to go back because I totally forgot about my plants. And so I'm pretty
Oh,
sure they're going to be dead in my office.
no, no, no.
Yeah.
What classes are you teaching next semester?
So same ones I taught this semester, which I love. One is 141, which is, writing fiction and poetry in this big lecture class. And then the second one is 143, which is writing short fiction. That's that really small 15-person workshop. Um, yeah, it's those two.
I know you talked about this in our class, but I'd like to get this for the viewers is the origin story behind 141 because you had
Yeah,
mentioned that it didn't exist before you brought it forth to the admin.
yeah. I love talking about that. And maybe you'll get a lot of viewers who will, be able to talk about it too, or bring it up with the department at some point if you have some kind of social activists out there. But so it existed on the books, but it hadn't been taught in like 20 years. And you can see like the class, like the official title is Modes of Writing. So it used to be that anyone could teach that class. It wasn't 100 people. It could have been like 25 people, and it could be any kind of writing. It would be tech writing or, just nonfiction or just who knows, anything that was writing associated. But so with Cal, and I'm sure it's like this with other universities, the course has to be in the course catalog, but you can amend it. So if you've ever taken like a seminar, you know that it all has the same number, but they're different topics. So when I first came here, there were only these small workshops, and I came from, which is, there's like one poetry, one fiction, one nonfiction, and like the best of times, that's like 45 kids who get to teach creative writing or take creative writing. So I had come from this like university that had all these kind of fiction and poetry classes, like I don't even know, 10. and they each had 25 kids. So there's 250 kids that were able to take creative writing. So I came here and I was like, this is ridiculous. You can't just have three classes and tell students that they have to be good at this thing that they've never done before. And there's only 45 of them that get to take this class. So I kind of created this class from the course catalog class and like created this thing and added more students. And it's like my most fulfilling class. I love teaching it. It's also really hard because you don't have that small workshop environment so that that's the hardest part about it. You're all workshopping on your own, but I'm not there to like guide you or kind of troubleshoot. But that's the only thing that makes this class work at all because you can't teach a creative writing class without getting like a lot of feedback. So
Mhm.
that's the general genesis story.
Love it. I want to get to how you started becoming a professor at UC Berkeley and
Yeah.
your authorship with specifically Larry Smith. But
Yeah.
I want to start at the beginning. When did you know you were a writer, and
Yeah.
when did you start exploring writing?
Yeah. So I mean, I wrote in high school, but like poetry and like journaling, and I did not want to do that. I actually thought I wanted to be an actor. I grew up in LA and like acted a lot when I was young, and then went to UC Irvine, and I was convinced I was going to be a theater major, although I actually have a degree in theater also. But
Oh wow.
yeah. So but I took this like one class, like it's not, I don't know what the Berkeley equivalent would be, but it's like R1, it might be like R1B or something like that, but you could have a slant to it. So our slant was like creative writing. So I took that class and basically like kind of felt like I was hit over the head with a bat. Like my whole worldview totally changed and like who I saw myself as and like what I wanted to do. And I had this really amazing, she was a grad student also. So that was, so I had it coming from, oh my God, this is an amazing thing that I want to do. And then she was super supportive. So that's how I knew I wanted to be a writer. And it kind of changed everything.
So between the time that you graduated to the time that you were a UC Berkeley professor,
Yeah.
can you fill in that space for me as somebody who's not very well aware?
Yeah. So I took a year off to just like be a server at a restaurant and then applied to graduate school. And so I went to graduate school in North Carolina, taught there for a little bit, came back into LA and taught at Cal State San Bernardino, and then moved to DC and taught at George Washington University, and then came to Cal. And like actually, I think my first book came out right when I started teaching at Cal. That's kind of the journey.
And what was the title of that first book?
The first book is called Playing, like Playing.
Talk to me about the inspiration that went behind you starting to create it
Yeah.
and how long of a process it was.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I'll ask this in class, like, how long do you think the average novel takes from beginning to publication? And people are always like shocked because it's like 5 years, which is about, I know, about the amount of time it took me. So I feel like every book has like a genesis story, and that playing probably is the best Genesis story. So before there were like actual podcasts, there were podcasts on the radio just called like radio shows. And there's this one called This American Life, which is still like super popular today. But it was like very much storytelling and like interesting stories and investigative type of stuff. But there was this one story about this guy who started this thing called the confession line. And this was before voicemail, like so people had answering machines, and you would call and just confess to this answering machine. Like you wouldn't say, oh, your name, you wouldn't say anything. It was just like kind of a thought experiment. And he had all the recordings. So that was part of this American Life podcast. And I heard it and I was like, oh my God, what would you be like, who would you become if you had had some of these things happen to you? So there was one particular which I'm always like, I'm not going to tell you what it is because it's like the kind of the impetus for the book, but something really really bad happened and this random person who we have no idea who they are confessed to it. So I was like, okay, if you did this horrible thing, like what would your grown-up life be like? So that was how that story started.
That's really interesting. I definitely want to try reading it at some point.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed was the content that we read in our modes of writing class. a
Yeah.
lot of it was very psychologically warping, and it challenged us to try to understand the nuances of characters that at a surface level you think they're just bad, right?
Yeah.
But you wanted us to have the thought experiment of reading past that and understanding everything about the story. How did you find these works, and what made
Yeah.
you decide these works that are now part of the regular curriculum?
Yeah, it's such a good question. Um, and I'm glad that the stories are doing that for you because I hope that they do. Um, you know what? So many places, like some of the more, like I'm adding a story in actually my small class this semester that I just read in the New Yorker. So some of them come just from things that I've read in the last however many years. And then some are very, I don't want to say traditional, but like a lot of creative writing classes use a few of those stories to talk about a very specific piece of craft. So like use of force with the doctor and the little girl, and you're talking about conflict. It's like so obvious. So, some of those I've like gleaned from other people. And here's something you totally don't want to hear, or at least I don't want to tell you, but here I'm going to tell you on the side. Like I like was like playing around with ChatGPT and I like fed into it. I was like, give me a syllabus for creative writing class, blah, 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 just to see like what it would say. And there was like a good amount of stories that AI recommended that I was teaching, which I was like, I don't know how I feel about this.
I mean, do you use ChatGPT on a semi-regular basis?
No, never. Except for like, what did I use it for the other day? Oh, I know two things. I like to plan a trip. Like, where are the, kind of the best places to see in Florence, Italy, right? Because then you get ideas and then you can kind of investigate those. Or another thing would be like, okay, I have a fever, I have, a rash, these kinds of symptoms. Like, what do you think I have? That kind of stuff, but never anything like creative or something I have to like call an assignment for grading or even my own writing.
Mhm.
Definitely, absolutely not.
The reason I had asked was because I know when you plug into ChatGPT, it likes
Yeah.
to memorize your kind of personality, and
Yeah.
then any feedback you get from then forward, it will be some little summary of everything that you've given it.
Yeah. And also it's super what's the word I'm looking for? Like affirming, like it feeds you what
Affirmative.
yeah, yeah, it feeds you what it knows you want to hear.
Mhm. What's the conversation like in the English department, particularly, or just with professors at UC Berkeley about AI?
Yeah. I mean, I think that it is a little bit of the Wild West right now, particularly with anything in the humanities, but pretty much, and like the only instruction we've got is make sure whatever your policy is, it's like very clear on your syllabus, which, is not much guidance. But I think generally humanities professors, particularly English, are like AI is evil. Like we do not use AI. No one may use AI. If it never existed, this would be a good thing. And I think that's like pretty one-dimensional. Like I definitely don't think AI has a big place in any kind of humanities classroom, but there's got to be some, it's not going away. So I think for creative work, absolutely not. But I'm sure that there are some things that it's good for. Although my favorite story about why you shouldn't use ChatGPT, at least for English classes, is a professor who will remain nameless had this assignment, and it was, it wasn't Shakespeare. Let's go with Shakespeare. Here is find three Shakespearean quotes and do this with them, and then write an essay on blah blah blah. And someone put into ChatGPT, find me three Shakespearean quotes, whatever. And one of the quotes was just totally made up. So this person wrote an essay about a made up Shakespearean quote.
Wow.
Yeah.
Not putting in the prior research.
Yeah. Well, and also you have, this is like the number one English department in the country. Like you would think that you would know that your Shakespeare professor knows all the quotes that exist.
One thing that I was interested in before I came into UC Berkeley was the idea of writing a senior thesis on AI and its implications in the modern world and
Yeah.
likening it to the Industrial Revolution, especially when I
Huh.
read transcendentalism and romantic poetry. I see a lot of similarities in Cultural Revolution in response to AI.
Yeah.
that I believe will happen. We're just in the beginning stages of something that's very new to us.
Yeah.
I'm very curious to find out if you know anyone that is thinking about doing a research paper on AI
Yeah.
and trying to investigate more.
That's a good question. I mean, I guess no-ish. Like I know that people are doing it in like the real world, like outside of, students doing it in academia. But I also had this graduate student once. I mean, I'd be like super interested to see what's happening now with her because it was like pre-AI, but not, right pre-AI, like 5 years ago or something. And she was figuring out something about writing process and reading process and how and quantifying it to see like how much time is spent here, how much time is there, how do you create this other thing. And so I'd be curious to see what she's doing now because with AI is such a, big part of that quantitative process of creativity. But yeah, not really. That sounds like super interesting. But the other thing I'll say is that, and this is like kind of tangentially related, is that I think there's going to be like a huge backlash, particularly probably at Berkeley to a certain extent, probably with humanities. Like I already see people, not with AI necessarily, because especially in English department, people are like, you may not speak about AI with us. But like with phones and devices, like I definitely see this big, I'm not bringing my device to class, or I'm not on my phone, or, I put limits on this kind of thing. And that's pretty new. Like it's not the majority by any means, but like 10% of students, like I'd never seen that before.
Mhm. You have uh kids that are in Generation Z, and do you
Yes.
have any Generation Alpha kids?
No, mine are 15 and 17. So
What
still
do you
Z.
see from them as far as technology? Do they
Yeah.
acknowledge to you the harm of technology? What do they think?
Yeah, yes and no. Like, so it's funny because yes, but they have a really hard time, putting limits on themselves. Like they have different pros and cons, like both of my kids. Like my older one watches a lot. She's a film person, so she watches a ton of films. So she's on like a device a lot, but it's not necessarily, and she's like big into Instagram, but she's not scrolling. My other one is really into the scrolling. And the only reason I don't worry about it so much is that they're like a super creative kid and a super athletic kid. So they spent a lot of their free time just like doing art or, like even if their Instagram is they have this Instagram about thrifting. So they go thrifting, find the best outfits, So I feel like they're the way that they kind of curtail themselves is, it could work. They could probably be better in some ways, but not. And I think like they definitely know it's bad for them because they see, schools bring in all the info and their parents are always saying you need breaks and blah, blah, blah. But like, as we know, it's super addictive. And so, they know, but they also don't follow what the guidelines are at the same time.
It's very interesting to me as somebody who in elementary school didn't have a phone.
Yeah.
But we were using technology. I had like video game consoles and things that took away
Yeah.
my time. But then the transition to middle school where we all were on our phones, but it
Yeah.
wasn't really transparent in the room where we knew it was bad. It was
Yeah.
more towards the end of high school when people would have more conversations about this actually has an effect on us. And especially
Yeah.
in college, people, including me, who use it religiously but still acknowledge the downsides while we're stuck into our addiction.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's exactly like them, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. That's why I think this whole backlash is happening slash will happen, and there's no way it's going to be complete. There's just no way. But like we've all heard of the people who've decided to get like a flip phone instead of like a smartphone, and or even just like only using a tablet. It like does limit how you interact with technology. Um, but also I think for my kids, they had like it definitely wasn't the parent that was like, you can, these are the hours you can use it and you can only use, here's your apps that you can't have. But they didn't get phones till eighth grade. And like, I do have like limits on their Instagram, but I'm sure they find ways to get around it. But they're pretty responsible kids. So I'm lucky with that.
How difficult was it to kind of, I guess, theorize? I don't know if that's the correct word. how you were going to handle that as a parent when
Yeah.
you knew that you didn't deal with that technology.
Yeah.
And also, you have to find a thin line between not doing too much,
Yeah.
but also doing
Yeah.
enough.
It's like the struggle of parenting with every single thing, like not allowing them to do much, but also, allowing them to. Um, I mean, I think like I am of the mindset, and I think if you talk to a bunch of like particularly humanities professors, they would not be like this. I'm of the mindset is that it's not all bad by any means. There's a lot of positive and good that comes from all this, technology, including social media, but also it's not good, right? So you have to constantly like balancing that. So I think the thing for me that really is the scrolling, because I know how bad it is for your brain and how addictive it is. So being online in general doesn't bother me for them, but I just wish that they had more control or we could have more control over the scrolling because that the constant video stimulation is just bad for the brain.
I agree. It prevents us from actually getting out, which instantly, for me, makes me feel better. The second I
Yeah.
step foot out of my door, I'm already in the real world, which makes me feel better
Yeah.
overall.
Well, and I think like one thing that they're saying, and I'm curious about for your generation, because I mean, my daughter's like basically going to college next year, so she's pretty much your generation. But
Mhm.
she they don't like hang out as much. Like they still have friends and they hang out, but I mean, honestly, probably 50% of the amount that I did. And I think it's because they have connection, constant connection. So they don't need, we had phones and we would talk on the phones, but it wasn't the same. So they're constantly like texting their friends and like, connecting.
All I could speak for is myself and my
Yeah.
experience with it. But I know when I transitioned into college, especially just being 18, a lot of things changed in your mindset about life and the way
Yeah.
you go about things. But in a college environment, not only at Berkeley, but at my community college,
Mm,
people want to hang out.
yeah.
There are a large percentage of people in college that go to school and leave and immediately go home or immediately go to their job. And I
Yeah.
was one of those people for about a year until I quit my job, took the brunt of bad financial damage, but
Yeah.
in it all worked out for me to get into Berkeley. And when I participate in clubs and I go
Yeah.
out all day and I speak to people as my break, as opposed to scrolling as my break,
Yeah.
that feels naturally better and it keeps my energy going throughout the day.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. And I do think there's that big shift between high school and college where you're so self-conscious in high school even, like even if you have like a strong sense of self, you are worried about like who's inviting me here and like can I go if I only know one person? Like, this kind of stuff, which is not like that never, has a place in your world once you become adult, but I do think it's less. So I bet you there's more social connections. And you're living with these people too. So you're just by default having social interactions.
And you're all going through a very similar experience, which is
Yeah.
I am still a kid, but I really need to level up as an adult. And
Yeah.
that experience in itself feeds into more deep conversations.
Yeah.
And I'll say, with being self-conscious, that is definitely true. I cared too much about what people thought about
Yeah.
me in high school. And while that still remains, I
Yeah.
was more in the world of technology at that time. I
Mm,
would say before you're 18 and really just going out there in college, you live on your phone. So if
right.
something happens to you online with toxicity or with bullying, it feels far more detrimental in high school than it does in
Yeah.
college.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping that for them too. I will say, like I said, I mean, my kids have like they have their own flaws, but their executive function is really high and their kind of emotional maturity. So I think they're doing a good job right now, but I hope it'll just like continue to, evolve.
I I feel for you because you're in a position where you have to just let go and hope.
Yeah,
And I
exactly.
know my mom's going through the same
Yeah,
thing, and I maybe you could verbalize it a lot better than I could in my own head about what my mom's experience
I
is.
know.
It's
I
really
mean, you're doing what you need to do. They're doing what they need to do, which is not think about our experience, right? And if you have like a parent, like I said, like I'm sure I've done things that I don't think are great with parenting, but that's one that I think that I've done well, which is like recognize that they need to have their own experiences, and like it's not my job to have everything filtered through me or to have them completely understand what it feels like to be, myself, and to put like my own emotions on them. But it's super
Mhm.
hard.
I wanted to shift the conversation now over to what you've done as a writer since your first book.
Yeah.
The one I'm most interested in talking about is your recent one with Larry Smith, because
Yeah.
not only did he lecture in our class, and
Yeah.
I made the connection with him, as well as I'd like to interview with him in the future.
Yeah.
I believe it's called The Joys of Marijuana,
It's the joy of cannabis.
The Joy of Cannabis.
And like
Tell me
I'll tell
about the
you,
origins of that.
right. Well, first of all, I'll give you this really fascinating fact that is, if you go to any dispensary, it's it will say cannabis dispensary. It'll never say marijuana dispensary. And the reason why is that the word, let me back up. So cannabis used to be the word that they used for cannabis pre-prohibition. And then when alcohol was illegal and then was later legalized, they needed to find something to like demonize, right? And to, kind of, that's when the drug enforcement agency was like created post-prohibition. And so what they did was they associated it with the Mexican Spanish word marijuana. And so what they were hoping to do was kind of have this anti-immigration, just like we're doing now, where we say, oh, we don't want these Mexicans coming up with their marijuana. So it kind of shifted the, negativity to Mexicans. And so there's this whole idea of like kind of reclaiming the word cannabis. Because it is A, what the scientific word is, and B, it was never meant to, at least in the US, be used the word marijuana was intentionally used to kind of denigrate people.
That's really interesting anecdote.
Yeah,
I know for me, I don't really use either words in my
yeah,
day-to-day. We just say
yeah,
weed or
yeah,
tree.
yeah,
Like that's
yeah. And you can tell how old someone is if they say like pot.
oh God, no, my mom says that all the
Yeah,
time.
well, that's what I grew up with too. But I just like learning to text. You have to like learn to amend your language depending on the
Mhm.
slang of the moment.
So how did you meet Larry Smith, and where did this idea of this book come from?
Yeah. We actually met at a Christmas party. And he was a writer, I'm a writer, so we just got started talking about all that. And uh we've done when the book first came out and we did all these readings and presentations, like we had like our pat like presentation basically. So this is a question that he would always take. But basically we're at this party and I said to him, does anyone want to go out on the deck and get high? And no one wanted to except for him. And so we talk about how even in, the Bay Area, there still is some stigma surrounding like cannabis. And so we kind of just wanted to write about that. And also it was right after this experience happened, it was the pandemic. And so it ended up kind of being a pandemic project, which was fun. And, like there's a lot of research, but a lot of fun in that book. So that's kind of how the genesis of it. And then we did a ton of research on like the science of it. I mean, I learned so much.
It's interesting that you say there's a stigma in the Bay,
Yeah.
because I feel I started smoking weed when I was almost 18, and I never felt like I was looked at any type of way, negatively
Mm.
for being high, other than being anxious when you're high, and then you start looking at everybody's eye contact towards you,
Yeah.
but that may be self-perceived as opposed to actually outside
Right.
perception. Wh when did you start smoking? I'm curious.
My kids know all of this. I mean, the first time I smoked weed, I was like 15, like pretty young. Although, I mean, obviously there's people that are younger. But it was, really irregular. So yeah, a lot of just like, I just don't drink. Like it just makes me feel bad. So it was, my one, not even vice, because I don't think it's bad. Like if someone told you they had a glass of wine in the evening, you'd be like, okay, good for you, glass of wine. But if you told someone, oh, I smoke a joint every evening, there's automatically this like, oh, just like a slight disconnect. So, and that was a big thing for me too. Like I would talk about cannabis with like grown-ups and they would have there'd be some judgment there, even if it was even if they smoked every now and then, or they did an edible. The idea that you could replace alcohol with weed was and still is, I think there is that stigma there of like that's not normal, but it's not preferred. And as we
I
know, like
think
alcohol is so much worse for you than cannabis for all kinds of reasons.
Mhm. I think the stigma generally comes from the association of stoner with couch
Hmm.
potato and
Yeah,
lazy. And in my own experience, both can be true. I think
yeah.
weed has made me lazy. Weed has made me really just in my bed or just
Hmm.
content with the everyday being the same thing. But
Yeah.
also weed has done a lot of things for me as a creator. Can you
Mm,
speak to me about
yeah.
what has weed done for your creation process? That's interesting
Not,
for me.
yeah. I mean, not very much. We get asked that a lot when we did our book tour, which was like, oh, did you write any of this high? And like the answer is surprisingly no. Um, writing does require so much mental acuity, I guess. There's this famous Ernest Hemingway quote, which is write drunk, edit sober. So you could say it's the equivalent, like you can, if you're gonna write when you're high and not edit because you have no kind of critical awareness. Um, but for me, it just like does not work. Like everything I just have no awareness of what's good or what's not good. It's just like completely does not work. I mean, there's probably been a few times that I've been stuck on like particularly like a plot point and like been high and like kind of, oh God, I have a solution to this. But honestly, it wouldn't necessarily be any different than like I have a plot problem and I go on a walk and like suddenly come into the answer.
That's really interesting because I like what you said about write drunk, edit sober, and I've used that with weed. I've written maybe half of my poems high, the other half sober. Either way, they all feel the same to me. But I
Mm,
know if I was high, it wouldn't be copy edited to the greatest
right.
extent.
Yeah. Yep.
How often do you smoke still to this day?
Um, uh, oh, that's a good answer to that. They ask you that on that when you go to the doctor, right? This many times a week, this many, right, whatever.
Mm,
I mean, I would say less than most people, if like this idea of like you have a drink in the evening, less than that and more than uh once every 3 months, somewhere in
mm.
between that.
I went into Berkeley, and my first day that I moved here was maybe a week before class started. I smoked every day,
Yeah.
except for like one day
Yeah.
until New Year's, basically. What's your advice
Yeah.
to me going on my tea break for the first time in a while?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think like I think there's like a difference, and I can only speak to one piece of this, and that is like, I've never, but I know a lot of kids now are, but I've never like used cannabis during the day. I mean, sure, if I was like going on some crazy nature hike and it's break and we're all doing it or whatever, but mostly, I really do use it as like in the evening or like going to a party or that kind of thing. Um, and so I think that you have less fallout if you're just, kind of doing a little bit in the evening. Um, but the whole THC break thing is real. Like I know people that don't smoke weed for a few weeks so that when they, smoke again, they can have, because that does happen, right? You end up not feeling it to the extent that you used to. And so if you do take a THC break, it's worth it. And the reason why is because your receptors almost become like virgins again, right? And if they've done the same thing over and over again, they're just not as you can't. I don't know. You just don't get the same feeling. Um,
Mhm.
but it's hard to stop anything, especially if you have a routine involved with it. So I would say like any kind of thing, the habit you want to break, like you have to substitute something else for that. And to be totally honest, like I think if you're smoking too much weed, you don't like it, you want to quit, but you really need some kind of bridge, like, and it's in the evening and appropriate, like drinking, it seems to me reasonable, like having a glass of wine, because you're substituting one thing for the other, and ultimately that's not necessarily a good idea. But like if you need to just get over that crutch and that desire for it, substituting, I think, is possible.
Mhm. This is maybe an impossible question for you to answer, but well, what do you think is the point that smoking weed is detrimental to somebody?
Yeah. Um, I think two things. Like one is if it is affecting, well, the question they always ask, is it affecting your quality of life? Do you still, are having problems with relationships? Or, when you go to the doctor, they ask all these things. Um, I think obviously then, but also I think if it affects your thinking, which it does. Like it can slow you down, it can make you a little bit like kind of hazy and not think as well. And I think that that is definitely a detriment. Also, if you're smoking, it's bad for your lungs. And also, we don't know enough. Like, there's plenty of studies that say, oh, cannabis is good for this or this, which is probably accurate. But the government couldn't even do, or researchers couldn't even do very many studies on cannabis because it was still a Schedule One drug. So as it's becoming less and less stigmatized, they're going to be able to do more studies. So we'll find out like what it means. But then the other thing is, and this is absolutely proven, is that it does affect like the young adult and teenage brain differently than it affects the grown-up brain. And like if you're smoking before you're 25, it's like is affecting like the growth of your brain. So like for my kids, in a perfect world, I wouldn't have them smoke anything until they were 25. But I usually am like do as little as possible just because it's really your brain needs to develop as much as possible. Um, so yeah, but teenagers are teenagers. So it's not like they're not gonna do it just because you told them it's not good for them.
That's true. Another Schedule One drug. I don't know if it changed under whatever the heck Trump just changed. I know
Yeah.
weed was recently changed to, I believe, Schedule Three.
Yeah.
Another Schedule One drug is any and all psychedelics. What do you
Yeah.
know about psychedelics and how do
Yeah.
you liken it to weed?
Yeah. No, I'm sure that's the next kind of stigma that's gonna fall. I mean, there's been like so much research on how helpful psychedelics can be for PTSD. Um, so I do think that that's going to be more and more common, but there's also still so much stigma um, that because you really, unlike cannabis, you really are pretty much out of your mind when you're doing these things, and it's scary to people, and it has to be in a situation that's safe, and they say with any kind of drug, set and setting. So like, who am I with? Where am I? That kind of thing. But I think that psychedelics have been proven, like MDMA, which isn't exactly a psychedelic, was created in a lab by a Berkeley professor to be used in therapy. So there's a lot of, besides just kind of recreational use that I think that is really gonna kind of explode. Because lots of therapists are even using it now, but they're doing it under like illegally.
I I know there's legal I don't know what you call it. Maybe they're still in the testing stage
Mm.
of reaching out to people and seeing if they want to be
Yeah.
basically a test subject for these studies.
Yeah.
But these studies were happening a lot
Yeah.
before it was prohibited,
Yeah.
and almost all the results were positive,
Yeah.
other than what you get is psychosis, which is a
Right.
very known bad side effect.
You know what? That's another thing to mention about cannabis is that I like so highly recommend either low dose THC, whether it's like an edible or an inhalant, like as low as possible, because there are so many more cases. Like this just didn't exist in like the 60s when regular weed was like a 12% THC. But a lot of people having psychotic breaks because the THC is too high.
Mhm. Do you prefer indica or sativa?
Sativa for sure.
Really?
Yeah,
Whoa.
yeah,
You're
yeah.
one of few that I know.
Oh, really? I think maybe when you become a mature quote unquote grown up, your body wants to feel different ways. Because most of the
Yeah.
people I know are all sativa, unless for sleep. The people I know for sleep use it for sleep. It's mostly indica.
I mean, for sure, I hang out with people in their 20s a lot, and we tend to go for hybrid or indica because
Yeah,
sativa is just an overthinking high.
right.
I
Yeah,
love the I
yeah.
love the feeling, but I don't love the 50% of the time I'm gonna get extremely anxious.
Well, okay, so here's I have a kind of a hint for you or helpful advice. Um, it's that's all the THC. Like so even if you had an indica that had super high THC, you probably would still be getting like that kind of paranoia anxiety. I mean, yes, it's more associated with sativas than indica, but it's 100% the THC. And the other thing to know about weed now is that there's almost nothing that is like a pure sativa or a pure indica. Everything has been so inbred that, that's why if you like go to a dispensary, they're never going to tell you something is sativa or indica. They're going to say sativa leaning.
Yeah,
Um, that because you can't, unless you're getting it tested in a lab, there's no way to know. And also, there's almost no pure sativas or indicas anymore.
that's crazy.
Yeah,
I want to go into a round of maybe just quick questions about
yeah,
craft, especially your experience with craft.
yeah.
First, what's your favorite mode of writing?
Fiction for sure.
And why is that?
I think you kind of just resonate with what you resonate with. Like I think of myself more as a narrative writer, and I think in character. So I think that's why.
What's the craft elements you notice people struggle with the
uh,
most at UC Berkeley?
I mean, number one, above and beyond conflict, which I get because students, any writer, but students like to like kind of um, explore ideas and thoughts and, just how people react to the world. But that is great for like interesting character building, but that isn't necessarily going to kind of compel a reader to keep reading because there's not enough story there.
Mm. What's the what's the best local communities and events for creative writers that students may not be aware of?
Yeah. Um, so there's a lot of stuff available online, which I know some of it, I don't know some of this, but there's three things I would recommend. One is there's two really, really good writing centers. One is called Left Margin Lit, and the other one is called The Grotto. And Left Margin Lit's in Berkeley, and they basically have like a ton of workshops and lectures for writers. That's all they do. And the other thing that I love about it is that they give one scholarship per class. So most of the time, many, many times it's gone to a student of mine that I like kind of recommend there. So I think that's really great. And then the other thing, what's the other thing I was gonna say? Oh, I always say you shouldn't really pay or you should pay very little for any kind of like writing instruction or feedback on your writing. I think that the one exception to this is that uh, like summer programs. So there's like some really great summer workshops. Like the big one that is like a quote unquote best is called Bread Loaf, like a loaf of bread, and it's in
Mhm.
Vermont. And those are pretty expensive. But those are the ones I feel like are really worth it. You're working with like super famous but also like incredibly excellent writers and you talk to agents and you're surrounded by people who are as serious about writing as you are. So I'd say like either local writing stuff or like these summer programs. And they're for adults. It's not for like even I mean college kids can apply, but you know what I mean. It's
Mhm.
not just for college kids.
And you've been a professor at Berkeley for how long?
My God. I was thinking about this the other day. I think like 19 years, which is crazy.
I'm 22 years old.
I know. I don't even like the fact that I'm gonna have a kid in college next year is I don't even know how to feel about this. Like I mean, yeah, now I've become all of your mothers. Before I was like slightly cool, like the older, slightly cool sister, and now I'm just like the mom.
You're a cool mom though.
Okay, cool. I'll go with that.
The last question, what are the coolest success stories of former students?
Oh, that's good. I mean, I have like a number. I mean, the one I just thought of right now, she's like such an early student of mine. But I just talked to her. She's like a New York Times on staff correspondent. And she's the one who broke that Stanford rape case. Um, I just like, wow. And then there's another student of mine I taught, but then she actually did some assistant work for me. And then she has had two books come out in the last like 2 years. Like, so there's like a number of people like that. And then there's like other kinds of success stories. Like I had this one student who I adored her and she's just so impressive. She's actually at Stanford Law right now. So it's like not even writing, but she, came from like the foster care system and like just had such an incredibly hard upbringing and then just, invested fully into school and like to see what she's done. I love that. I love more than like, oh, I've become a writer now. I love like just watching students succeed and whatever. And I think that one of the reasons why is that I don't think I'm teaching creative writing just to like create writers. Like I do feel like for the most part, most what I think happens and what I want to happen is that people's minds expand in ways that they didn't know. And they either, sure, some of them become writers, but they fall in love with writing or they fall in love with reading or they understand humans in a way that they hadn't before and they get to have this experience.
All right. Thank you so much, Melanie.
Yeah.